While I do love keyboards, they need to be pretty unique in their feature set for me to justify doing an entire review video for them here on the channel. When it comes to the XPLUS VickyBoard, let's just say they had me at CNC machined polished acrylic. Today's video is brought to you by NordPass. Are you tired of memorizing hundreds of account names and passwords? Worried someone will discover your super secret password list? Do you have credentials you need to share with friends or colleagues? Stop saving everything to an online document and switch to NordPass. With NordPass, you can generate and store secure passwords for every account you own, and it will even make sure you're not using the same password twice. There are desktop, mobile, and web applications for every platform, making it simple to access your passwords no matter which device or operating systems you prefer. If you've been hesitant to use a password manager because of security concerns, NordPass has a zero-knowledge architecture, meaning your data is encrypted and you have the only key to unlock it. But don't take their word for it. NordPass recently passed an AICPA SOC Type 2 security evaluation, meaning they've implemented proper security practices to ensure the privacy of customer data. Stop reusing insecure passwords, or keeping them written down in plain text. Visit nordpass.com/craft to get exclusive access to NordPass's best offers. It's risk-free and comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Again, that's nordpass.com/craft, and a huge thanks to NordPass for sponsoring today's video. Welcome back to Craft Computing, everyone. As always, I'm Jeff. Like I said in the intro, it's been a little while since I've done a full keyboard review on this channel. Keyboards usually need to check some pretty innovative or unique feature boxes for me to consider doing a full review. Like naming your company Drunk Deer, that did it last time. In the world of custom keyboards, there's no shortage of features that can turn heads, and this one certainly has one of the more unique designs that I've seen in quite some time. This is the XPLUS VickyBoard, a split layout keyboard loaded with premium features and exquisite build quality. Before we get into it, thanks to XPLUS for sending out the VickyBoard for this review. Like all reviews on the channel, no money changed hands. XPLUS has no input over the production of this video, nor will they get the opportunity to see it before it goes live on YouTube. Obviously, we need to start with aesthetics and the polished acrylic main body. I don't see many acrylic PC components anymore, and in fact, the last one I reviewed was the daily driver keyboard that I have over on my streaming PC, but it is a frosted acrylic, not a polished acrylic. Polishing acrylic is an entire process unto its own. I have to say, I do miss the world of transparent electronics. It is a bit of a callback to the days when limpbiscuit.exe was at the top of the charts. Enthusiasts ran Alienware pre-builts while poor people built their own PCs. And companies didn't care if you opened up a product to see inside of it, or even fixed a problem yourself. To say the VickyBoard is well built would be quite the understatement, as it's the second heaviest keyboard in this room, finishing runner-up only to the aluminum CNC'd monster that I built just a couple years ago. I mean, seriously, this thing is stout. That rigid feel translates very well into how the keyboard feels when typing on it. My particular model comes with khaki brown switches, which offer a moderately stiff feel and a satisfying bump when the key actuates. There's also options for Cherry MX red switches if you prefer linear actuation, or Gateron blues for that clicky classic feel. Why they're offering only 3 different key switches from 3 different OEMs, I have no idea, although they do mention that they may offer more in the future over on their Indiegogo page. More on that later. Internally, we're looking at a QMK-compatible controller, and it is fully customizable through most key layout editors. Keyboard Lab is also hosting an online layout editor for the VickyBoard, making it easy to set up your keyboard exactly the way you want. And I think that's as good a transition as any to start talking about the actual hardware, about how well constructed and solid this keyboard feels, and how much I desperately wanted to like and use it. As I mentioned, the keyboard is made from 2 pieces of machined acrylic and is an absolute tank. Forget about any potential deck flex, or for that matter, any potential of it sliding across your desk. This is not going anywhere, and if it did, your biggest worry is going to be personal injury. Each key on the VickyBoard is individually backlit and individually addressable, and looks absolutely fantastic when shining through the clear body. One of my main worries coming into this review would be how easy is the acrylic to scratch. I've had clear peripherals before. Remember acrylic side panels before tempered glass finally took over in cases? They would all end up looking absolutely terrible inside of a year, even without much contact to them. I'm very happy to report that after a couple of weeks on my desk and a couple more weeks being moved around the office, I can't find a single mark or scratch on this. Now, this isn't exactly a jerry-rig everything scale of hardness test, but given just about every other acrylic device can be scratched by wiping dust off it with a microfiber cloth, I think it's safe to say this keyboard will stand up to moderate use over the years. The VickyBoard is based on QMK firmware, and that firmware is completely open source, allowing you to customize your key layout to fit your exact needs. This is a multi-mode keyboard as well, allowing for USB or Bluetooth connectivity options, and both work exactly as you'd expect. Overall, I am very impressed with the hardware on display here. The keycaps themselves have a fantastic feel and sound thanks to the rigid body, and it's hard to complain about a fully programmable keyboard that you can customize to your heart's content. But I'm certainly going to try. Now, I promised myself before starting this review process that this was going to be a video about the VickyBoard as a hardware product, not a review of the Alice keyboard layout. But I really just couldn't help myself, as I have quite a few complaints about this layout, and I think my experience of trying to adjust to using this board over the last couple of weeks will be important for some people to hear if they're considering a split keyboard like this. There are also some specifics in the marketing from XPLUS and VickyBoard that I'd also like to address. Starting with the obvious, and that's your wrist angle when using the VickyBoard versus traditional layouts. The VickyBoard is split in the middle, with each half of the keyboard offset by about 14 degrees. XPLUS claims that the key columns are angled to promote a more natural angle for your wrists. But the graphic they use to demonstrate this is horribly out of proportion. I understand it is exaggerated to show a difference, but I also think the 44 degrees shown here is a bit extreme. Just imagine how far apart that guy's elbows must be for that angle to even work in the first place. Now, looking down at my hands when I was typing up this review on my aluminum keyboard here, my wrists were pretty much completely straight from my arms the entire time. There's no deflection on them at all at their natural position. Switching over to the VickyBoard, I actually didn't see much of a difference in the angle of my approach. And I'll lay these two vertical shots overhead right here so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. My elbows are tucked in neatly, my wrists are not resting on the desk, my fingers are well curved. It's almost like working in IT for 13 years leads itself to having pretty solid posture for working at a computer. The most obvious adjustment over a traditional keyboard layout is the split center, but the key columns themselves are completely different from a normal keyboard as well. See, normal keyboards typically are staggered, with each row of keys laying about 70% offset from the row below it. They're designed this way to help your fingers find the center of the keycaps from the home row position. As your finger extends to reach the top and curls to reach the bottom, your finger will naturally fall into the correct position. The VickyBoard, though, is arranged in 100% completely straight columns with no staggering at all, which completely killed my muscle memory that I developed over a lifetime when trying to switch over to this board. I've used all kinds of different keyboards over the years. Desktop boards, laptop keyboards of all shapes and sizes. I even went with a Kinesis for a short time, and I have never had this much trouble trying to adjust to a new keyboard. Now, part of this is the rows being completely vertical and needing to adjust how far my finger travels to land in the correct spot, but this is also due to the non-uniform spacing, as the keys are closer together at the bottom than they are at the top. They kind of fan out like this. The other reason I had a really hard time transitioning was because you can't read the keycaps. The legends are on the back side, and with the per key RGB lighting enabled, the white text completely disappears, meaning even if I wanted to cheat by looking down at the keyboard, it does you absolutely no good when the lighting is on. This is a 72 key design in total, thanks to having no function key row, no 10 key number pad, and even some reduced cursor control keys. The lack of a number pad really doesn't bother me at all, as even in my personal collection of keyboards, I'm pretty much 50-50 on having one versus not. The cursor controls are limited to home and end, with page up and page down being completely left off, though funny enough, we still do have an insert key right here. And my brain kind of goes, why couldn't we have home, page up, page down, and end by adding a fourth key right there? That would make a heck of a lot more sense than home, end, and insert as my only options. Out of the box, my biggest gripe is actually the lack of function keys, with not only F1 through 12 not printed on any of the keycaps, they're also not even programmed as an alternate function key in the firmware on the number row, which is pretty typical for small format keyboards like this. Checking in on their marketing, the VickyBoard offers, quote, notable advantages by omitting F keys. In their own words, it creates a sleek, space-saving design, which I'd have to agree with, as removing keys usually does make keyboards smaller. I continue. This not only enhances aesthetics, but also conserves desk space, providing a more organized and uncluttered workspace. So in their words, function keys are just clutter, and you minimalists should get over needing to use them. If you want to rename a file, just right-click on the file, go to the Show More Options button, and then click Rename. That's so much more efficient than pressing F2. My suspicion on why the function row was removed? Well, acrylic is really expensive, and so is this machining process. So there's no better way to save money than by removing 14 keys from the top row. And yes, thanks to QMK firmware, I could add the F keys as alternates to the number row, but I'm still scratching my head as why this wasn't done from the factory in the first place. The other oddity that I just could not get used to is the centralized backspace key. That is this key right here. Backspace is usually in the top right of the alpha keys, in line with the number row, and it's been that way ever since typewriters first introduced that function. On the surface, XPLUS sounds like they have a fantastic reason for moving backspace, as well as relocating Control, Shift, and Enter into the center row of this keyboard. And that is to limit the stress on your pinky, the weakest of the fingers. The thumb is very underused in traditional keyboard layouts, so repositioning these keys utilizes it without adding undue stress. Their exact words. That sounds all well and good, except when you start questioning why modifier keys were placed around the perimeter of the keyboard in the first place. It's because they're also some of the least used keys, and allowing our weakest digit to press them once out of every 100 to 300 character key presses isn't, in my opinion, putting that much undue stress on them. And when trying to adapt to the new center row keys using my thumb, well, the thumb may be your strongest digit, but it's also the shortest. And while Control and Shift are easily reachable, Enter and Backspace are completely out of the question. The utility and usability of the center keys is going to be completely up to your own typing style. Adjusting to this new layout got me truly to consider the way that I use my keyboard. How do I type? Which fingers do I use for which keys? And I learned some really interesting things about myself in that process. I use my left pinky far more than I do my right, but my left pinky is still only responsible for 4 keys: A, Z, left shift, and Control. I learned while studying the way my hands move, I don't use the right shift key at all. Even if I need to enter a capital A, I'll use the left shift on my pinky and then my ring finger on the A key. While my hands always return to the home row like a good middle schooler in his very first typing class, there's a lot of hand adjustment that takes place to make it easier to press certain keys. My right pinky, for example, does hit return for me. Sometimes. I found more often than not, I actually shift my hand to the right and use my right ring finger for most of the keys on this side of the keyboard. Period, return, comma, that's all done with my ring finger. Quotation marks and question marks, that I actually do use my pinky for. I also found that my left hand tends to drift over to the right side of the keyboard to cover for when my right hand also drifts that direction. On more than one occasion, I found my left hand pressing the Y key, specifically when typing the word my. Because my right hand dips down to press the M key, rather than moving up to readjust and then re-lifting to hit Y, I simply drifted my left hand over and pressed it instinctively. So why does this matter, and why do you need to know about my personal typing habits? Well, let's move back to the VickyBoard and those pinky-saving center keys. Because my right hand floats to the edge to cover keys like Enter and, in this case, Delete or Backspace, it's traveling the same distance whether I'm moving left to hit the center or right to hit the far right side. The angle of my wrist really doesn't change when my hand is floating to one side of the keyboard or the other. That happens in either my elbow or my shoulder, not my wrist. And with the gap in the center of the keyboard, it prevents my left hand from covering for certain key presses, like typing my. The number row up here is also wildly spaced at the top to keep the columns straight, meaning there's not a uniform distance between the keys, making typing in numbers an incredibly difficult adjustment to make. So, where does that leave us? I really wanted to like the VickyBoard. I genuinely wanted to switch over to this keyboard simply because of its unique look and potentially ergonomic saving design. I'm no stranger to odd layouts, as I mentioned at the top of this video. In fact, I think everyone between 1999 and 2006 probably daily drove a Microsoft Ergo board at one point. But despite my decades of typing experience, I personally never once got a feel for this board. Whether that's down to my personal typing style or a problem inherent with the non-uniform spacing of these keys, this really is the first time I've never been able to transition over to a new device. Questionable ergonomic benefits aside, let's talk brass tacks. While XPLUS was running an Indiegogo campaign for the VickyBoard, it ended last month and raised a whopping $469 total. That tells me that no one thought the early bird pricing for the VickyBoard was competitive enough, with the board itself going for $180, or with the included carrying case and felt desk mat going for $209. And that's to say even less about their claimed retail price of $250 just for the keyboard and $330 for this travel package. They did send out the latter, and I will say the carrying case is quite nice, but it's not $80 nice. The desk mat is something that feels like it was assembled from a local craft store with dollar store felt, and is definitely not up to the same quality as the keyboard. Also, why does it have a seam in the middle of it that's never going to completely lay flat? Why? And what's this bit of crudely not squarely cut leather? Leatherette. This thing's just horrible. Given the terrible results of the crowdfunding campaign, I considered not even doing this review, but figured I had enough keyboard enthusiasts to follow me, and surely there was still some good information that could come out of doing a video like this. I learned quite a bit about my own typing style by trying to turn it on its head, but I actually feel like I've improved a couple aspects of my typing simply by being aware of what I'm doing. So, thumbs up to XPLUS for that. This may not be the keyboard for me, but if you're interested in the XPLUS VickyBoard, I will have links down in the video description. On your way down there, make sure to drop this video a like and subscribe to Craft Computing if you haven't done so already. Follow me on social media at Craft Computing for daily shenanigans like this. And if you like the content you see on this channel and want to help support me in what I do, head on over to craftcomputing.store, pick yourself up one of our nucleated laser engraved pint glasses, and start drinking like a pro. That's going to do it for me in this one. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next video. Cheers, guys. Seriously, this desk mouse sucks. Beer for today is from Level Beer, barn brewed up in Portland, Oregon. It is the Game On IPA, clocking in at 6.5%. Level Beer Game On IPA. I avoided doing the review until a little bit later in this one because I just had lunch and the flavor wasn't sitting well with my orange chicken. Very vegetal forward hop profile. Even on the nose, it's got this very earthy vegetal aroma to it. Like a cucumber, but before you've sliced into it. Like that cucumber rind kind of flavor. Cucumber skin? We'll go with skin. This is not going to be the IPA to introduce your friends who don't drink IPAs to. This one, it's got some bitterness to it. It's got some coleslaw. It's got some chutzpah to it. That is a little bit deeper and a little bit danker than I think most people are going to want to venture on their first try. This is not going to be a beer for everyone, but for those who do like those bitter, vegetable, grassy style IPAs, this one's right up there with them.